That's all.
Welcome everybody to TUFF. I'm Mark Bonto, and today we've got our panel of guests today, and we're just going to get into the round table and talk all about it. On my far right, your left, LeeAnne Avery. Deanna, thank you. Next to her, we have the one, the only LeeAnne Walters. LeeAnne.
Hello.
She's got the military thing going on. I'll teach her how to salute later. And of course, our adopted mother, the one we love, Jan Berryman. Jan, welcome back.
Hello.
You're like an old pro here, right? Because you were on 3 of our shows before. Certainly.
Wow, look at you, TV star.
Right? Jan does not hold back her opinions on nothing. Right?
This is true.
We love every minute of it.
And we do. LeeAnne, welcome back. So go ahead.
When I get to be Jan's age, I aspire to be her.
Yeah.
This is how I want to be that age.
Yes.
Well,
I think we all do.
Thank you.
I'll even me. I want to be Jan. I do. The Fetterman side is coming out of me.
That's all right.
All right, so let's talk Flint. Let's talk the water crisis. Let's talk everything that's going on.
Okay.
You're back up here in Flint temporarily because you're in Virginia now.
No, I live in Flint.
You live in Flint, but
I drive back and forth every 2 weeks.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. My husband got restationed after we pissed the government off. And so he's there, I'm here. So I live 2 weeks in Flint and then 2 weeks in Virginia. I've been doing that since 2015.
Wow.
We still own our home. My driver's license is still Flint. Our taxes are still Flint.
Right.
No, this is our home. When he's done, he's got 2.5 years left. And when he's done, this is where we come back to.
Awesome. See, that shows your love of Flint and
Absolutely.
the city.
We're not done yet.
And you've been right on top fighting the whole way.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning. Well, there's a lot to talk about.
Right.
We're going to have to spill it over to the next show and maybe 3 and 4. But so it all started when...
Well, before we realized it was the water, we were starting to have some health issues in the summer of 2014 and into the fall of 2014. It was getting worse.
Right after the switch.
Yep. They kept diagnosing my family with scabies after swimming in our pool. But they would only stay in it was localized. It wasn't spreading like scabies does.
Right.
And then, so we finally got sick of that, started seeing a dermatologist, and they would do skin scrapes and say it's not scabies, we don't know what it is. But that's how it started. That was the first part of it. And then we started experiencing the hair loss. The rashes were getting worse. My then 14-year-old got really sick. And at one point, they told us they thought he had cancer. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Thankfully, he didn't.
Wow.
But with that going on, I have at that time, my twins were 3. And I have a child with a compromised immune system, one of my twins. So we watched him a little bit more closely, and we started noticing that he wasn't gaining weight like he was. He wasn't keeping up with his brother, and since birth, he's always been within 3 pounds of each other and a half inch of each other. So it was kind of like, okay, we started worrying that something else might be going on, not realizing water. We were stupid. We had a whole house filter, and so we had installed all new plumbing when we bought our house with this filter, thinking, oh, we're safe. It doesn't matter that we're on the river.
Right.
Not realizing that it was just a sediment filter. So we were using the water because we're like, we ain't got nothing to worry about. We have a filter.
Yeah.
We were wrong.
Nobody knew at the time that it was more than just needing a filter.
Right, but I'd heard other people saying, and I knew the stories. I mean, I've been in Flint since I was since 1993.
Right.
No, sorry, 95. And so... knowing that, like, I've heard stories about the river. When we would go fishing with my dad after we moved here, it was don't eat anything you get out of there. You can fish, but don't eat it. And my dad's like, what's the point of that? So we wouldn't fish there. But I mean, the whole time I've been hearing, don't drink it, don't swim in it, don't eat anything out of it. Seeing like the dead bodies that were pulled out of it and the cars and stuff, like.
But you figured the city of Flint knew what they were doing, right? They knew what they were doing, right?
We did, and then again, we thought we were protected because I had like my best friend who lived in Mount Morris was like, "You're really gonna drink that?" I'm like, "Yeah, we got the filter, we're good."
Right.
December of 2014 is when we had our first bout of brown water. It was right after Christmas, And my son that was having all the health issues, he had been out of school for over a month. And I got a phone call, and they were like, how are you saying he's this sick? He's been up here. He now wants to go to the gym. He's doing great. Whereas he could not walk up our steps. He'd be doubled over in pain. He couldn't carry his backpack. His backpack was too heavy. He was getting dizzy and real bad headaches. And so we were like, what's going on? When we talked to the city about the brown water, we were told they were winterizing the system.
Of course.
And so we're like, okay. And then a couple days later, we got the notice in the mail about the TTHMs. And it,
TTHMs. You said that really fast.
Oh, yes, sorry. It's the Jersey in me. I apologize. I can
The
talk.
Joyziness is coming out. TTHM.
I can talk really fast.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
And
Which
so,
stands for, now who can, Jan,
total trihalomethane. Methane. I can't talk today. Can you do it? Do you know it?
Total trihalomethane.
There you go.
She just likes saying the hell part.
With that notice, though, we have a child with a compromised immune system.
Right.
So that's listed on there. We contacted his pediatrician. We started going into meetings. We're talking with the city, and we're sharing with the city the brown water, the rashes, the hair loss, and they're telling us that this is all specific to our home, that nobody else is experiencing this, and there was no media coverage, so we didn't know any better.
Right.
And so when we had the meeting at the Dome, end of January 2015. We went in that meeting, and there was a police presence there, and then we're seeing all these people holding up jugs of discolored water and bags of hair and showing off their rashes.
It's not just you.
We're like, okay, what the hell's going on?
Right.
And so when me and my husband got in the car after that meeting, we're like, okay, well, there's all this physical evidence. He's a military police officer, so that's immediately where his mind goes.
Right.
And he's like, how do they not see this? How are they not listening? What do we have to do to get their attention? And so we decided to get to the science of it, because you can't argue with science.
Right.
And so I started teaching myself about water distribution systems and water chemicals and how all that stuff reacts. And I mean, quite honest, when I did figure out, I eventually figured out that they were breaking the law by not adding the proper corrosion controls. But in that moment, I didn't understand the magnitude of that. I had called Miguel from the EPA, Miguel del Toro,
Right.
to ask him questions about polymerates. And he's like, no, you gotta be missing something. You're missing a page. Flip it over. And I'm like, everything else is numbers.
So how did you get Miguel's? No, you just looked him up, and why him?
Well, I had contacted. Well, I'll take it back for a minute. I had contacted the EPA because of the TTHM stuff, and the person you dealt with is Jennifer Crooks, and her last name is correct. Just saying.
Perfect.
And so,
Matches the person.
yes, that was my first contact. And then I had gotten my son's pediatrician at the time had written a note because I had taken a video of what happened to my children when they were coming in contact with the water. And with a child with a compromised immune system, it was so bad. I mean, you could see a water line across the stomach after 10 minutes of being in the tub, where his skin was perfectly clear after, and then you could see the bumps.
Wow.
And then when you'd go to lotion him up afterwards, he would scream and cry and be hysterical, telling us how bad it burned him.
Wow.
And it didn't matter what we used. I mean, they even did medicated lotions at one point, and it was just getting worse. And so by taking that video into the doctor, the pediatrician's office, they then turned around and wrote us a note saying that Gavin was breaking out because of the water. And the city at this point had just put me on a list to test. I was at, just somewhere on a list. And when that note was handed into the city, they had somebody out immediately to test. And they did not believe me that our water was coming in brown. I was told by Jerry Ambrose that I was a liar and that I was stupid.
Emergency manager at the time.
Yes. That my water, that was not my water.
Father Ambrose, as I called him.
he was cussed out by quite a bit of people at many meetings, but that's another story.
Well, yeah, no, he told me that no one would believe me that was the water coming out of my tap, because it wasn't. And so after we got the doctor's note, they had someone out like within 48 hours to come test our water. And it was Mike Glasgow from the water department who said, okay, well, he came out, he had to see the brown water. And then he's like, all right, well, let's do some testing. And they did my first lead and copper test. And from that result, like, everybody started losing their mind because the result was so high.
Yeah.
EPA maximum is 15 parts per billion. My first test result was 104 parts per billion.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
And so,
It's only 6 times more than normal.
well,
Yeah.
you know. And so from that, Ms. Crooks put me in touch with Miguel Del Toro because he's a lead technical expert
Right.
to talk with
Gotcha.
him about everything. And so because I made him, we always joke because I made him earn my trust. Because he kept asking me all the same questions I was getting from the city and the state, and then nobody was doing anything. That, you know, the fact that I was willing to put the work in myself and I made him earn my trust, he was willing to help me, and he let me use him as a mentor as I was trying to figure things out. And so, I mean, he's like the real hero in this because he was willing to help. And so then we did my second lead test in March of 15. And that test result came back at 397 parts per billion.
Wow. Wow.
Now, we do know there was a third test done in April. We don't know how it was gathered. We found out about the third test by FOIA.
On your house?
Yeah.
And you have no way of knowing.
We don't know.
Really?
Yeah. And that one came back at 707 parts per billion.
Wow.
Keeps going up.
Yeah. But then when that was going on, the pediatrician's office was refusing to test my kids for lead. They were telling me they did get permission from the city.
Oh my.
And then later on, I was able to put together that my son's pediatrician, his wife, was the emergency manager's assistant.
Oh.
So everything kind of ties into,
Yes.
I see what's going on.
And the doctor that was helping me as I'm figuring all this stuff out walked into a meeting, and he had told us that he thought that my 14-year-old, his problems were because of TTHMs, but there was no way to prove it because we didn't know what was going on during that time.
Right.
And he recanted on everything, and then he walked into one of our appointments with a stack of papers telling me that he had talked to the city, which I did not get permission for, and that there was nothing wrong, and that I was just going to be, I'm just a troublemaker, and that he refused to do anything for my kids related to water.
Wow.
So I got a new pediatrician.
Of course, who wouldn't?
Oh yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
That would have been the first thing I did.
Right.
So I got a dermatologist outside of the city for my family, and I begged her to do a lead and copper test for my son at that time because he was the only one seeing her. I mean, she'd seen all of us with the rashes, but he was the worst case, and it was his appointment, and she did, and that's where we found out that Gavin had lead poisoning.
Wow.
And so a couple days prior to this, I had been talking with Mayor Walling at the time, former mayor, at the library meeting. And he said he knew everything was going on with my family. He was very concerned. If anything should change, so please let him know. And so after we got the results from the doctor's office, and after I had my little nervous breakdown in the kitchen, pulled it together. Me and my husband went down to talk to Walling. He was gone for the holiday. And we were told that he would call us on Monday, just so we're clear. That was April 2015. Monday has never come. We're in 2018.
Of course.
Wow.
And Duffy, aka Duffy, Doherty Johnson, had this brilliant idea after they had me go talk to the attorneys. And they wanted me to put in a number of what my damage claim would be to take care of everything, and told me I could put $1 million in for that claim. To shut off our water and hook my house up to garden hoses until they said it would be 3 to 4 days.
Unbelievable.
Well, yeah.
It would be 3 to 4 days, and then they would get it taken care of and get a new service line installed. And then a couple days later, they came out. We had the garden hoses hooked up. They told my neighbor they weren't going to charge her. They weren't going to charge us. She was kind enough to let us do this. And then they decided that there was this contract I needed to sign. It was supposed to be a standard agreement saying that for like 5 generations, my family would have no claim on lead for health, any person, or any lead damage to the home.
So that was something you signed right up for, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
In the very first paragraph, it says, please see Exhibit A, and it has my son's lab work in it, all the testing for my home, everything.
Right.
So we refused to sign it, and so they left us hooked up to garden hoses for 5 weeks.
Wow. I remember that time. I
Yeah.
remember that time.
And they didn't use the proper hoses. When the hose they hooked it up, and like 3 days later, it froze and split. So they came out and replaced it with a different hose. and that wasn't a potable hose, and so my family wound up with a rare staph infection
Oh no.
from that.
You've had a lot of luck with these people, haven't
I
you?
have. The state nurse was great when my son was diagnosed with lead poisoning. When I called to talk to her about it because of his compromised immune system, she told me, well, it's just a few IQ points. It's not the end of the world.
Oh
No.
my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. She runs the lead program for the state of Michigan.
No, I don't think she needs to be there.
I agree with you on that.
Just a few points. Just a few points different.
And so from there, I turned around and I started researching about lead in water, kids in lead in water, to see what was going on. And the only person I could find that had done anything with that was Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech. And so I had said to Miguel, because the EPA was did testing at my home too, we did sequential sampling. I said, hey, I found this professor. I'm going to reach out to him and see if he can help me. And he's like, well, what's his name? And I told him. He goes, well, funny you should say that. And I said, why? He said, because they're the ones conducting the independent sampling from your home to verify our results.
Oh, wow.
He's like, so yes, give Mark a call. And so I've been working with Mark Edwards ever since.
And he was just as nice as Miguel.
Oh, he's the most wonderful man in the
Oh,
world.
yeah.
Angry guy.
Yeah.
The one thing I love about Mark Edwards is that he doesn't have that like God complex where you can ask him anything. And
Very
you
down to
don't,
earth.
right, you don't feel stupid.
Yeah.
You don't feel like he's talking down to you. Like, he explains it as simply as possible, but not in a
Right.
insulting
Condescending
way.
way.
Yeah,
Right, right.
like
Not
he's
in
just,
a condescending
Right.
yeah. We say that he's very blue collar.
Yeah.
Oh,
There you go, yeah.
absolutely.
Because he's down to earth and you can understand what he's saying, and even though he's a highly acclaimed professor,
Right.
he is very understandable, and he's very, the guy bought me a beer. I love the guy. Right? And it was great. We had a good time
The wonderful thing about Mark, and I will always say this, and this goes for Miguel del Toro too, they had been to my house many times,
Mhm.
each time asking me what my attitude was towards ever drinking the tap water again. And the first time Miguel asked me, I started laughing. I says, I will never drink the tap water in the city of Flint or anywhere else.
Mm-mm.
And Miguel, if I happen to see him, he'll say, well, what's our attitude, Jan? Same as it was last time.
Still not gonna drink it.
No
We haven't
way.
drinking. We haven't.
No.
Never.
No.
No matter what. It just.
That's why I love my Culligan water,
Mhm.
because if I get thirsty, all I gotta do is
Mm-hmm. And they can dig up. They've dug up like our lines, and they've dug up the front yard, and it's copper lines. There's no lead lines, but you cannot tell me that water is good or it's not tainted. It's got all kinds. How did you find out? This is interesting to me. How you found out about the no corrosion control? This is very intriguing to me. I love this. And I really don't know the answer to this. How did you?
Because I was trying to teach myself about the different chemicals used in water and what the proper amounts were.
This is phenomenal. that you know
And,
this, I think.
Miguel was very instrumental into that
Mhm.
because anytime I had questions about how the interactions occurred and why one was better than another, he's the same way. Like, Miguel will tell you, because he works for the EPA, he's a civil servant, and that is his job. It is his job to help people.
What a guy. What a guy.
And so, like, he was very helpful. And I had gathered all the reports. I'd asked Howard Croft for all the reports from the city, and he gave them to me for the year of 2014 and 2015. And so I was reading those, and I was actually concentrating on those specific chemicals. And I was taking those and then looking at what proper treatment is and what federal law was. And I wasn't seeing anything that was a corrosion control from what I was seeing online. And so the one thing that I didn't know anything about was polymerase. And so that's why I called him and said, hey, can polymerase be used as a corrosion control? And he was like, no, what are you reading?
Right.
And so I explained it to him. He said, okay, read me all the chemicals. And I did. And he's like, okay, flip the page. And I said, no, everything forward is all numbers. It's all the millions of gallons per use per day.
Right.
It's nothing else. This is the only page of chemicals. And he's like, okay, read it to me again. And he made me read it like 4 times.
Mhm.
And then he's like, all right, he's like, you got to be missing something. I got to be missing something. And I said, no, that's why I'm asking you about polymerates.
Yeah.
Is that, and he's like, no, that has nothing to do with that. And then he went into an explanation on that, and he's asked me to send it to him.
Mhm.
And then he called me back, and the PC version, or the not the PG version, I should say, was, oh my God, they're breaking a federal law. They're not using any corrosion controls. And the MDEQ, when that question had been asked prior to this, had said yes, they were using corrosion controls.
Right.
And I handed him the proof that no, they weren't using corrosion controls. But even though I'm researching this and I'm figuring it out because I'm like newborn phase of this,
Right.
I didn't understand the impact this was going to have.
Mhm. Well, yeah. I mean, and plus, you believe that the MDEQ would know what they're talking about, and you kind of, I don't know, but I mean, I think that's great on your part to kind of stick to it. It's like, no, I'm not seeing any corrosion control here, and it would be easy for someone just to back down of a big department like that and say, yes, we are. Oh, okay, I don't know, but you didn't.
No, I would have my laptop going, my husband's laptop going, and my phone, and then different notebooks for what I was taking different notes in.
Right.
To try and like I didn't want to just read it and be like, okay, well, this is this. I wanted to understand the reactions. I wanted to understand why they reacted the way they did and why these were proper for the proper chemicals to be going into our water.
Right. You got a whole new system, didn't you, Jan? You got everything. Didn't you get everything? All the guts of your sink and your. You had something. Don't look at me like that.
I had to get a whole new
Everything.
water faucet thing, which was only about 2.5, 3 years old.
Yeah.
And let me guarantee you, when the Corps people came to my house and their mouths dropped open because they says, do you need any filters? I said, no, because I had to buy a new water faucet and that. And I said, mine will not take.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had to go get one, I took LeeAnne with me. And LeeAnne helped me get the best one on the market.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will forever be grateful for.
Yeah.
No, you won't.
Yes, I will.
There's no thanks needed. I'll help you with
I
anything.
know that. I know.
You used your muscle over here to get what you needed.
To make sure I was getting the right thing and the best.
We have to make sure because the regulations changed for how much lead is allowed to be in water faucets.
Yep.
And so wanting to make sure that she was getting one that has the new maximum,
Standards,
the new standards.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter that my nephew had just put that in about 2.5 to 3 years before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no water faucet should go out that fast.
No.
Right.
No.
And I mean, it just ate it right through because it just cracked it in half.
And you didn't think about calling your nephew and saying, you did a bad job on my...
No.
It wasn't the nephew.
No.
It was the faucet. It was
the faucet.
Yeah.
It was the water.
Yeah.
And then last year, to top it all off, and I didn't think my my hot water heater was that old because my mother had just replaced it shortly before she died. Well, maybe they're only supposed to last 10 years. Anybody got any ideas? So my mother's only been gone now 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hot water heaters are generally supposed to go about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
well, anyway, I got up one morning and I have a nice little stream going across my thing. And I mean, I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. The only thing I get is Social Security. So I thought, oh, this is just great. So I went and got myself a little Home Depot card. That was the only way I was going to be able to get one. So I got that. They have a company that installs for them. Well, $1,300 later with the installation, I have a new hot water heater, which so far is working great.
Sucks on the price because you got a new hot water heater.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do want to mention though, because we were talking about my test results.
Yes.
The test results that we have, the 104, the 397, the 707, those are tested by the city with loopholes. There's 3 loopholes that they use to hide and minimize lead when they're testing. When I actually did testing with Virginia Tech without the loopholes, my average test was 2,500 parts per billion.
Wow.
And my highest was 13,200 parts per billion.
Wow.
Wow.
Hazardous waste is 5,000, so our house was 2.5 times that of hazardous waste of lead coming into it because of them not treating the water properly.
Are you saying loopholes? Is that what you're saying?
Loopholes.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So
it's the Joyzy in you again, but
sometimes.
so what were the loopholes? They found like little ways of toning down the number.
Yes. So what it is that the way the law is, or the way the rule is written, if they have you pre-flush the night before that water has to sit for the minimum of 6 hours, it's washing away a significant amount of the lead before you even test. That's the biggest one. The second one is that they have you use the wrong size bottle mouth. So when you test, you want to test with the opening of a mason jar. Instead, they give you a bottle that has an opening like a water bottle, because when you test, you want to have your water turned on high flow rate to capture anything that's breaking off in there. And by using something that size, you're going to turn around and you're going to have to turn it on slow to catch it.
I don't know if I call that loopholes. I would call those
because it's not illegal. These are things that they found the work around the rule as it stands.
Workarounds, yeah.
The third thing they do is called cap on stagnation. So in order to conduct the test, you have to wait a minimum of 6 hours before you can gather the sample. But there's not supposed to be a maximum time that you let it sit. So in the city of Flint, if you let it sit for longer than 8, they will disqualify your test. Back then. The rules have changed since then. But that maximum number, there should never be one. Because lead will continue to accumulate the longer it sits.
Right.
And then one of the things we found, and this was a new one that nobody had ever seen, when we had our military housing tested in Virginia, because we had conducted our own independent sample and came back at 16 parts per billion in military housing. And then they had a fit about it. They had an independent come in. And when they wanted us to do their independent testing, the rules that we were given from them were, you have to let your water sit for a minimum of 6 hours. But please use, you can't use the faucet at all. But try to minimize flushing of your toilets, running your dishwasher, running your washing machine. You're not supposed to use any water. So to minimize, no, that's completely incorrect. So that
they find all kinds of ways to get around it.
That was a whole new one that Miguel had not seen, Mark had not seen, and they've been in the lead business for 25 plus years.
Wow.
So that one was very interesting.
Yeah, very creative.
Yes.
Very creative. That's a good word for it.
Definitely.
Wow. And go ahead.
And you're supposed to trust these people and go around, just
Finding loopholes.
LeeAnne, what brought us to the point where after, what's it been now, maybe a couple of years, where they did the fast flow testing from the outside water
You're
hose?
talking about the faucet?
Yeah, the outside spigot for your water hose.
What is the question you're asking?
Why did we start testing? Because our homes, and I know mine for one in Carrie's, were consistently high.
Right.
Then they said, okay, we're going to do a fast flow testing. What brought them to that point where they wanted to do the fast flow?
Because they were trying to get further into the system, because every 1 liter bottle that you fill, it captures 7 to 10 foot of pipe. And so they were trying to do it to get to the source, trying to figure out the source, if they could map it out by footage per bottle and get an estimate of where they thought the lead was coming from. Whether it was coming from internal plumbing, external plumbing outside of the home, the main. So like when they did wind up finally replacing my service line. Apparently there was an anonymous donation. And when they replaced my service line, Miguel happened to be there, and we verified that my service line was galvanized iron, because the city kept saying it was specific to my home. The problem was my internal plumbing.
Right.
My internal plumbing is all plastic, installed in 2011, so it wasn't that. And then they were saying my service line was lead. And then we proved with the replacement, I was galvanized iron, and it was hooked to a lead service line that was the city's.
Of course. Wow.
So lead is attracted to iron when you're not using the right chemicals. So, I mean, it was a recipe of disaster.
This half hour has gone by so fast, but we can continue on the next show. Will you come back?
Absolutely.
Or basically, stay seated. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Let's get into this more next time.
Was that too much?
That was perfect. That was perfect. So this is the wrap up of TUFF for myself, Mark Monto, LeeAnne Walters, Dan Avery, and Mom Jan Berryman.
Mom Jan Berryman.
Everybody have a safe night. Good night.